In this episode of QuickSpeak English, we're diving headfirst into some common English mistakes. You know, the little gremlins that trip us up, even seasoned speakers like ourselves. Sometimes.
Exactly. So I got something super cool for you. A whole list of common pitfalls and how to avoid them. It's going to be awesome, right? We're going to tackle these head on, and I'm really excited to share this with you all. First point, subject-verb agreement. It's like a classic, but people still stumble on it, you know?
Subject-verb agreement? Okay, so like what exactly is that? I mean, I think I get the general idea, but let's break it down for our listeners.
Sure thing. So subject-verb agreement just means that the verb in a sentence has to agree in number with the subject. So if the subject is singular, if the subject is plural, the verb is plural. Simple, right? But it gets tricky sometimes, like if you have a compound subject joined by and, it's usually plural, but there are exceptions, and that's where things get interesting. And like sometimes it's not always straightforward to spot, you know?
Oh, I see. So like he goes to the store is correct because he is singular, and goes is the singular form of the verb to go, right? But if we said they go to the store, that's also correct because they is plural and go is the plural form, right?
Absolutely, you got it. And that's pretty straightforward. The thing is, well, it gets more complicated with phrases like each of or either of or neither of, which always take singular verbs even if the noun following them is plural. So each of the students is responsible for their own project is correct, not are. And that trips a lot of people up, you know?
Okay, I'm starting to get it. It's all about paying attention to the subject and matching the verb, even when it's a bit sneaky. So like, what are some other common mistakes? I'm really eager to learn more.
Okay, so next up, pronoun agreement. This one's like a real doozy. Pronouns have to agree in number and gender with the nouns they refer to. So, you know, if you're talking about a singular male person, you can't use they or them, which you know, is becoming more accepted, but still grammatically incorrect. You need to use he or him, and it's the same with other pronouns and gender as well. And that's an important aspect to remember, you know?
Right.
Vocabulary preview?
I see what you mean. It's confusing sometimes, but I think I'm starting to grasp it. So using the wrong pronoun could really change the meaning of the sentence. Makes sense.
Exactly. And another common mistake is tense consistency. People switch tenses mid-sentence or even mid-paragraph without realizing it. Like you might start a sentence in the past tense and then suddenly switch to present tense. It's jarring and it often makes the writing more confusing. And I see this quite often. You know, it's very important to maintain that consistency.
Oh, wow. That's a really good point. I never really thought about that, but I see it all the time. I guess you're right. It throws the whole thing off.
Absolutely. Another classic is using the wrong preposition. We use prepositions all the time, but they're tricky because there aren't really rules, only usage patterns. I'm waiting for the bus, not at or on. It's all about familiarity and practice, you know? And then there's the problem of dangling modifiers, which always causes problems.
Dangling modifiers? What are those?
Okay, so a dangling modifier is a phrase or clause that doesn't clearly modify any specific word in the sentence, like running down the street, the ice cream melted. Who was running? The ice cream. No, that's absurd. And you've got to make sure that they're clearly referring to the subject of the sentence. The sentence needs rewriting, like running down the street, I dropped my ice cream. Get it? And these are quite common, actually.
Yeah, I get it now. That's really helpful. So just be clear about what your phrases and clauses modify, right?
Precisely. And finally, articles, a, an, and the, are often misused. A before consonant sounds, and before vowel sounds, and the for specific things. It's subtle but makes a difference. So an hour, but a unicorn. You know, these little things really add up. And they matter, you know, they matter quite a lot.
Wow. That was a lot of information. This is absolutely fantastic. I learned so much today. I think our listeners will too. I'm feeling much more confident about my English now, thanks to your expertise.
You're welcome. I'm glad I could help. It's always nice when people people get the hang of the language. Remember, practice makes perfect, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all do. And even native English speakers, they stumble too. It's all part of the learning process, you know? I hope our listeners found this episode useful. And speaking of useful, did you hear about the restaurant on the moon? I heard the food was good, but it had no atmosphere.
Oh, Lily, you're too much. Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode of QuickSpeak English. Thank you all for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. Remember to keep practicing and keep speaking.
Second paragraph in the dialogue.
In this episode of QuickSpeak English, we're diving into some common English mistakes that even native speakers sometimes make. We'll be exploring why these mistakes happen and how to avoid them. Lily, are you ready to unravel the mysteries of English grammar?
Absolutely, Sophia. I'm excited to dissect these language quirks. I've always been fascinated by the nuances of the English language, and I know our listeners will find this incredibly useful.
Let's start with a classic. The confusion between there, and there.
Vocabulary preview.
Many people mix these words up, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a common mistake. There shows possession. It belongs to them. There is a contraction of they are, and there indicates a location. The trick is understanding the context and the function of each word in the sentence.
Exactly. It's not just about memorization, it's about understanding. Let's move on to another common problem, verb tenses. Specifically,
Dialogue.
The difference between the present perfect and past simple.
Ah, yes. This is a tricky one. The present perfect tense, using have or has with a past participle, describes actions that started in the past and continue to the present or have a result in the present. For example, I have lived in London for 5 years means I still live there. The past simple, on the other hand, using the past tense of the verb, describes actions completed in the past, like I lived in London for 5 years means I don't live there anymore.
Precisely. The nuance is crucial here. This is where context and understanding the timeline of the action are very important. Speaking of tricky aspects, let's talk about prepositions.
Oh boy, prepositions are notorious. They're like the ninja assassins of English grammar, as Peter from the script put it, silently causing havoc in our sentences. The subtle differences in meaning between on time, in time, at the weekend, and on the weekend are a perfect example. Even native English speakers from different regions use them differently.
That's a great analogy. They seem simple at first, but they can drastically change the meaning of a sentence. I remember struggling with prepositions when I first started learning English. It's easy to make a mistake, and they're hard to grasp, especially considering regional variations.
Absolutely. And it gets even more confusing when you consider idioms and phrasal verbs, where the preposition plays a critical role in understanding the entire meaning. It's all about practice and immersion.
So, how can our listeners improve their English and avoid these common mistakes? Based on the script, immersion is key.
Definitely. The script suggests reading extensively, listening to native speakers, and becoming aware of these subtle differences in meaning. This is all about practice, practice, practice. More importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's excellent advice. Making mistakes is a natural part of the learning process. In fact, making mistakes is how we learn. It's about embracing those mistakes,
Vocabulary
learning
preview.
from them, and keeping on practicing. It is also key to understand that English is a constantly evolving language.
Exactly. Language is about communication, not perfection. And let's not forget the importance of context. Understanding the context in which a word is used is just as important as knowing its definition.
Let's take a quick break here for a little joke. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field.
That's a good one, Sophia. Okay, let's get back to the topic. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the notorious there trio to the intricacies of verb tenses and the sneaky prepositions.
We've also emphasized the importance of immersion, consistent practice, and not being afraid to make mistakes. The key takeaway is that mastering English is a journey, not a race. It requires consistent effort, a willingness to learn, and a good sense of humor.
Precisely. And remember, there's always more to learn. Even native speakers still make mistakes occasionally, which is a testament to how nuanced and complex the English language truly is.
So to recap, the secret to improving your English lies in active engagement with the language, consistent practice, and the embrace of mistakes. Remember, every mistake is a learning opportunity.
Absolutely. We hope our listeners found this episode both informative and entertaining. Don't forget to share this episode with your friends who are also learning English and subscribe to our podcast for more exciting episodes.
That's right. And before we go, one more joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything.
That's a great one, Sophia. Thanks for joining me for another insightful episode of QuickSpeak English. Until next time.
Goodbye, everyone, and happy learning.